Selamat datang ke ASM Podcast yang dibawakan khas oleh Akademi Sains Malaysia. Siri podcast ini merupakan platform perkongsian topik-topik berkaitan sains, teknologi, inovasi dan ekonomi STIE secara santai dan mudah difahami. Setiap episod akan menampilkan jaringan pakar ASM yang akan berkongsi pengalaman dan pendapat mereka tentang STIE seiring dengan etos ASM. Budayakan sains, raikan teknologi, cetuskan inovasi.
Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera. Welcome to a special edition of our podcast celebrating a monumental celebration of 30th anniversary of Akademi. And today is a special day for me because we will be discussing with 4 presidents of the Akademi, looking at what we have done so far, where we are now, and then we would like to discuss what's next. Maybe another 30 years of Akademi, how do we want to chart our journey. So, one thing working in Akademi, I can see transition from one president to another president, but the path, the mission is always the same. And it's continuous from one president to another president. So today we are fortunate to have 4 out of 6 presidents that we have. We have Academician Emeritus Professor Tan Sri Datuk Dr. Omar Abdul Rahman, the founding president of the Akademi. Then we have Academician Tan Sri Datuk Dr. Yusuf Basirun, he's the 3rd president of Akademi. Then we have Academician Professor Emerita Datuk Dr. Asma Ismail, the 5th president of Akademi and the only female for now. And then we have our current president, Academician Datuk Dr. Tengku Muhammad Azman Sharifuddin. So as you can see, all our presidents now is a senior fellows and you have gone through a journey. So as a start for the first segment of our podcast today, I would like to ask, we start off with Tan Sri Omar as a founding president. Okay, when you chart the landscape of science and technology for the country, during that time I remember the formation of Akademi, the formation of MIT, Technology Park. All these are main players in STI landscape for the country until today. They play their own significant role in the STI landscape. So what motivated Tan Sri during that time as a science advisor to the Prime Minister to have all these players of STI laying down the foundation for us to move forward in science, technology, innovation, Tan Sri?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm very happy to be here 30 years after the founding of the Akademi. Well, an Academy of Science is an integral part of the STI ecosystem. And STI is a major enabler for whatever you want to do in national development, or nowadays people talk about in socio-economic transformation. I got interested in this issue when I became the DVC academic at UPM and was responsible for research. And then working together with colleagues in Science, Malaysian Scientific Association, trying to see how to strengthen the ecosystem, in particular how to think about putting together an idea to the government on the establishment of an academy. And then at that time, Malaysian Scientific Association, the president was Dr. M.K., the late Dr. M.K. Rajakumar. And together with him and other people, we worked to get the support from the Ministry of Science and from MPKSN at that time. Okay. Now the push towards the formation of an academy became more or gathered momentum when I became science advisor in the Prime Minister Department. The Prime Minister Department of Dr. Mahathir who is our supreme champion for science and technology. So with his support, we managed to put together an idea of him presenting to cabinet the establishment of an academy. So I managed to get together people like Dr. Lee Yu Cheong, Raja Kumar, and a few others to sit down together to say, what do we do? So the idea was to write a cabinet paper for Dr. Mahathir to present to cabinet. So we did. We sat down and did that. I was trying to trace that cabinet paper that we prepared. I don't know where that went. Anyway, to cut the story short, we presented the Tun Mahathir presented that paper to cabinet on the 17th November 1993. That was actually the third time the paper was presented to cabinet. Twice before that, it was not accepted. But on that day, after careful presentation, Tun managed to put that across. But before the cabinet meeting, I went to him personally to say, to brief him again on all these things. And I mentioned to him, sir, in the Philippines, the people so respect their scientists that the senior ones are actually given life stipend until they die. You look at that. When he presented that to cabinet, not only the cabinet paper was approved, the idea of the senior fellows was also approved. And then later on, the ministry found the money to give that extra thing. 10,000, I thought at least they should give 1,000 a year, a month. That would be 12,000 a year, only 10,000. Anyway, that is the story. And then, who do we bring in as the founding fellows? I suggested in our cabinet paper 50 founding fellows. How do we search that? My recommendation was all the scientists in Malaysia who are members of other academies should first become fellows. So people like Augustine Ong, myself, who were part of the old Academy of Science, the late the Dean of Vet Science after me, and a few of us were the first one. And then we wrote to the scientific organization in Malaysia and to the ministry to suggest names. And then under the chairmanship of KSN at that time, Ahmad Sarji, the first 50 were selected, presented to the Minister of Science, who agreed that the first 50 will be such and such. And from the first 50, the first council was established. And the first council, Tunku was one of them.
I was, yes.
Tan Sri Augustine Ong was the other one. Tan Sri Saleh was the other one.
Yeah.
And I was selected to be the first president after the approval of the Agong, because the constitution say the president must be on the concurrence of the Agong. So that's how it is today. So that's how the whole thing got started. And that was much because Dr. Mahathir was the one supporting that. He saw the need of a science advice. So he established Science Advisor's Office in the Prime Minister's Department. Actually, the Science Advisor at that time has an office in the Prime Minister's Department, in the Prime Minister's Office. Yes. I remember my office, first of all, in Jalan Dato' Un. And then later on, when we moved, my office was downstairs. Anwar, Deputy PM, was the office upstairs there. So when I'm going to see the PM, have to pass his office. And I have access to the PM quite openly because I build the rapport with the chief secretary to ASM who happened to be orang Kelantan juga. So the rapport was there. Nak jumpa I can't remember the name. He was the one that facilitated me. And then to get the academy started, the administration part of it, we were looking for somebody with experience in administration and who's also a scientist. And we came across Samsudin Tugiman, who just retired from, I think
RRI.
Yeah. And then he started putting his field together and opening Puan Azam was one of those who started the whole thing. So we had no problem in starting the thing, especially when we received a 12.3 million launching grant from the ministry. And the president had an easy time at that time anyway. So that's how the whole thing got started and my role in getting this thing going.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Thank you. So since then, from 50 fellows, foundation fellows, now we have 505 fellows, Tan Sri, comprising from 8 disciplines. And from 2016, we start having fellows from social science and humanities. So that is additional disciplines of experts in academy. So looking at that, the first, I think, big task given by the ministry to academy is to Tan Sri Yusof Bashirul, asking you to lead, to review dasar sains teknologi inovasi yang pertama, for us to come up with dasar sains and teknologi yang kedua. And what is the primary challenges in persuading policymakers and stakeholders during that time? And when you lead, I remember you lead that studies, and some of the recommendations stand still sampai hari ini under the National Science and Technology Policy 3. Yeah, so because it's still relevant. Things like Akta Sains, kita dah cakap since that time, and it's still relevant until today. So how do you see, Tan Sri, the challenges for academy in positioning ourselves as a think tank and giving input to the policymakers?
When I was appointed to lead as the third president of the academy, it was a case of moving on, taking on the tasks and the challenges imposed on us. Basically, to me, it is to raise awareness about the capability and role of the academy to serve the nation in the field of science and scientific development, as well as to raise awareness of the government to use science as a basis for economic development, socio-economic development, because science could be the foundation for development, other thing as well, but science is fundamentally a good tool to assist the development of the country's economy. So with that in mind, I was really trying to attract the interest of the community, our own members, as well as academic science members, as well as the government. How do we position science to be the engine of growth for the country? And because we need to have the knowledge or the awareness about what field is the most appropriate for Malaysia to develop and evolve into the tool of economic development for the country. Because science is so big, we can't handle everything. So there was an attempt to focus on the specific niche areas that will stimulate our economic development if we are able to fulfill the other components of scientific development, meaning you have to back up your scientific development ideas with real scientific research and service, and to discover how this can be commercialized, because without commercial money component in the development of the scientific tool to enable development, it would not function, it will not survive.
Yes.
So all these have been something that I've been practicing in my own Palm Oil Research Institute of Malaysia, or MPOB, where commercialization of scientific development innovation is very critical to improve and extend the development capability of that scientific tool to achieve whatever target we want to achieve, especially development. So based on that, we did prospective studies, foresight studies to see which area would be of interest to the country, would be ideal for the country to develop. Always bearing in mind that we have a lot of natural resources. Natural resources meaning we have plenty of water, shoreline is so long, including Sabah and Sarawak. What industry can we evolve out of this long shoreline? Not just waterfront development for tourists, but a lot more, I believe. So we did actual study that we commissioned to members of our academy to see what is possible, what is potentially that can be developed, and what kind of scientific backing will need to be done to help develop that particular area of potential development. So on and so on. We find that we are still very young in terms of academy journey, and we need to actually have our database properly developed, because without good understanding of what we are capable of doing, or where we are going in the majority of our research, we won't be able to, back up whatever areas of interest that we want to pursue. So we did like top scientists award by registering all the research being done by the top scientists, so that we know where we are strong in and so on. So this is basically taking on the task of a young academy to fulfill its function in trying to introduce a scientific tool in the country's economic development process.
Thank you, Tan Sri. If Tan Sri Omar setting the physical players, and then Tan Sri Yusof, during your tenure, you start the TRSM for us to take stock where is our strength and see how we can move forward. Then one of the things that you just mentioned just now is on commercialization. And that is one of the challenges, how we want to translate all the knowledge into something that is tangible for market or to give solutions. So Datuk Tengku Azman, during you a bit special, you are at the beginning of the academy, and then you come back as a vice president, and now as the current president, you have seen how it evolved and how academy have changed our roles and how we play our roles. As one of the projects to answer the commercialization is the new economic model that we have presented to Majlis Sains Negara, the National Science Council, and that is where our first attempt to bring the quadruple helix to work together for commercialization. How do you see academy play this role until today for us to address the innovation chasm that had always a taboo between the scientific community and the industry?
Thank you. I've listened very carefully to Tan Sri Umar's historical development and Tan Sri Yusof's tenure as president. All these are important building blocks towards what we are doing now. But let me go to the past and look at the challenges at the time that the academy was created. At that time, I was actually also involved in policy making. In fact, our work started slightly earlier than the academy's launching, 1995.
Right.
Let me give the background. The challenge at that time was something new that I think most of us did not perceive. We are not new to development or development planning. The 5-year plans have been going on for many years, but I saw one difference. The difference between the development planning of the past and what is happening now is that the past way of planning is scientific, no doubt, based on data analysis, the same thing. However, the place of science and technology were not very strong. Secondly, it was not proactive. Proactive meaning that we have to have a view of the future. And that happened, fortunately for me, for the country perhaps, that in 1994, the cabinet decided that MIMOS should become the secretariat to the National Information Technology Council. We have been speaking about IT for many years, from the late 80s, I believe. And at the time that we started, 1994, the internet had just been launched. So we could see the future, but most people couldn't perceive. So it was fortunate that the first engagement we had with the Prime Minister then, Tun Mahathir, was with a group of consultants who came up with a very cogent analysis of where Malaysia stood in terms of the present and the future. I will give you some simple conclusions. One conclusion was Malaysia could not continue on the manufacturing path. The value added will be not enough. We run out of people, we run out of land, even run out of capital. So the question asked was, what could we do? So we came up with an answer that we must move into the IT industries, which are not the physical kind of production, but based on creativity, innovation, that are based on intangibles, on knowledge, on creativity, and experience, on culture. That was the creation of the Multimedia Sport Corridor. But that was not all. The National IT Council actually covered many other fields that are not today, maybe not, again, not understood, but becoming more and more clear. For example, the only real success that we see visible is something like Upin and Ipin. But behind the Upin and Ipin, actually infrastructures, systems, content, platforms, that actually most people do not see that. It's under the iceberg, as usual. But these are the things that actually were developed in the last 20, 30 years. So how that happened was in parallel with ASM. Let me return to the ASM idea. I had a small hand in putting the pieces together, because at that time, as an engineer, I knew Lee Yi Chong for a long time, and he approached me 1993, the year mentioned by Tan Sri Umar, that he wanted to start a National Academy of Engineering. So I had spoken to Tan Sri. I knew about the formation of the academy. I said, no, you don't create another one. You bring the engineers into the Academy of Sciences. I think after that, he saw you. And that's how you came together. I also knew that Tan Sri Umar had spoken to Dr. Raja Kumar, whom I knew from UM days a long time ago. Raja Kumar brought in the medical and health sciences. So that integrated the whole scientific community, which is very good for the country because we could not afford to have more splintering.
Yes.
I happen to be an engineer. I was a member of the engineering institution. I no longer am, because I do not feel that that institution represented my ideals, meaning that it is for the engineers, but it cannot cross the boundaries. The way you Tan Sri Yusof mentioned, I prefer integration. All the scientists come together and we work on the same problems together. So that was my view. So anyway, when the academy started, I was on the council, but I really couldn't spare enough time, unfortunately, because I was so busy dealing with the other council. And we made a lot of headway in those years.
The first starting.
Yes.
MSc.
But it was a very good experience for me because I cut my teeth for the first time in policy making. Just to share, I understood really what makes political will, and I can describe that later. Political will is something that we mention all the time, but I think most of us do not see how it actually works. I will share a model that I think may work better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tunku. So, Dr. Asma, hearing from the 3 foundation fellows, you are the one president that doesn't come from the foundation fellows group. So, yeah, among the young generations, among Academy's fellows. looking at that during your presidential era or time, how do you create the culture among scientists? One of the attempts under your leadership is when Minister of Science during that time, YB Khairi Jamaluddin, launched Dasar Sains Teknologi Inovasi ketiga, the third policy, together with a framework of 1010 MySTIU. That is, I think, one of the attempt to change the culture of how scientists work through the framework, for us to bring in together, just like what Dr. Tengku said, all the scientists to work together with industry, with the government and society. So, does the culture works? Where are we right now? So, Dato' Asma,
Okay.
your view.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this wonderful podcast. And I think this is a great idea to be able to hear from the various presidents how they bring the academy forward. First of all, I have to congratulate the fact that, after 30 years, Academy Science is still strong, if not stronger. That's how I feel. And that the only thing is that, I'm the only one that is different here, being the first woman to be president, but I hope I'm not the last one. Because I think as a woman, there's also many ideas that we can contribute to the diversity of how policies are being done. Having listened to the other three presidents before, how Tan Sri Omar laid the foundation, how awareness is now being created, and of course integration, working together between the science and the arts also coming in together to solve a problem. I happen to come in outside of the foundation. I don't have the benefit of listening to what the founders are doing, what they want to do. But I'm a practical person. As far as I'm concerned, you can have a lot of great ideas, but is it institutionalized? So for me, if all these great ideas doesn't become policy of the country, then a lot of these ideas will just remain as ideas. And I'm used to the fact that Malaysia is very good in creating blueprints, but our implementation is the one that is always a problem, to the point that all these great ideas doesn't cascade down to the ground. So basically, I think I was at the verge of saying, how long are we going to be a think tank? How long do we want to go on creating without actually having an impact to what's happening on the ground? So to me, if we don't change it into policy, then that becomes, to me, a big problem lah. But having it to be a policy sahaja also is not good enough, because it has to be cascaded to the ground. It has to be implemented correctly. So now we come to the point, do we go from from think tank to change maker, and also to now doer, perhaps selective doer, okay? Because it has to be shown the correct way of doing things, right? Whether the question, are we ready? I mean, you brought up political will, and you brought up Datuk Tengku about the need for policy. But the bridge to go from great ideas to now be able to present it to the policy makers, and whether they accept our ideas. If they do accept our ideas, then it becomes a policy for the country. But it's a long journey to do that. I think we can get all the studies done, we can get all the data, we can get evidence-based, we can get people to come in and share their ideas, how is the best way forward. We can get all that. But the ability lies in our strength, I think, that we need to develop to change all this to become policy. And that is the crux of the problem. We do not have enough. We have a lot of thinkers who can come up with great ideas, but when we are presenting it, it has to be in the mindset that the policymaker can accept. And most of the time, our ideas are more academically inclined because we have the data, we have everything. But to the policymaker, they are seeing things from a different worldview. So for them, there's the politics. Will people vote for me if I agree to this policy? What about the economic impact? Is there going to be economic impact coming out of this? And I think that's where our dasar STIE, I think that is the crux that got everybody to be now and say, okay, science is important. I mean, we have Rukun Negara already that says the progress in Malaysia should follow science is the one that will make the country progressive. Tetapi it's like nobody remembered that, you know. But I think the turning point or the pivotal point is when we have science, technology, engineering, link that to economy of the country. Suddenly now everybody will see, okay, science is important, science has economic impact, and therefore that's how 1010 My STIE, when we developed that became part and parcel of RMK 12. And that is the inroad that we need to now make sure that all scientific STIE-driven missions are now people can see, okay, this is the way forward when you use science and technology. Okay, but without understanding, this is going to be a problem because at implementation again. And I think during the time when I was president, when we were developing this, we think about the next level, how to do the how. It's not enough to be a think tank. It's not enough to get into the policy. You need to now cascade that idea to the ground, to the people who are actually going to implement it so that they understand it. And that is working at 3,000 feet rather than 30,000 feet. And to do that, we need to now undergo how to do the how. So it's a long journey, as I said, to see something happen. And this is where I think a lot of us need to be trained more in policy, how to change the STI into policy. And this is where I think most of us have come to the sunset age already. But I think there's room now for our top research scientists, there's room now for our fellows, and room now for us to groom the young scientist network. They will be our future generation, and they need to now not be naive. They need to understand that all these great ideas that they have, if you want to see it happen to the ground, you need to now be able to be good in policy. So basically, I learned the hard way also, but we learn enough so that our science outlook and everything that we have done, 80% success rate. 80% success rate, all because of this turning point on how we do things about policy. So I think it's so very important. I'm very happy to be guided by STIPAC. At that time, the advisor was Datuk Tengku, because like I said, I'm a very practical person. I like to see things happening. How do it happen? But sometimes I lack philosophy. I lack the in-depth knowledge that we need guidance from the people who are the wise ones. So that, to me, is a good blend. It's a good blend because when you go to the current policymakers, they just want to see, is it going to work or not? Is it going to work or not? They are not interested in philosophy. But if you have the philosophy of how things are being done, then the way we are approaching it now makes sense. There's a framework, there's a way, there's a strategy of how to do this. So maybe to the policymakers, they are not interested. But to us, when we want to come out with all these ideas about what is the new policy that's going to be, it's very important that we have a framework. We have something that is going to guide us, and that's the philosophy, and that's the knowledge that we need to be. So that's why I think, although I'm involved in a lot of the projects, but I'm always guided by knowledgeable people in STIPAC and of course to now know how to go forward. So in order for us to now move forward, I think we need more people to be trained. I need also, when we want to present policies nowadays, when they think about science, they think about, let's call Akademi Sains. It should be the other. We should also be proactive. We are telling them, this is a problem on climate change. We need to do things. This is a problem with COVID. We need our health, public health. We need to do something. So, but the platform needs to be there. The only platform we have now is the National Science Council. Alhamdulillah, we get to be a member of the National Science Council. The president is a member. The chair of the Young Scientist Network is a member. But still, it's a convincing act to now have this thing. But we have a direct line. Whereas all the other academies around the world, when they listen to the fact, how the hell do you manage to get 80% success rate? Because they have always think tank, even the National Science Academy of the United States, they are a think tank, but they don't have access to the cabinet. They don't have access to a council like the National Science Council. So we are having a competitive edge at that. But we need to keep on coming up with new ideas. So sometimes only a selected people, it's called selective influence. People of credibility, Tan Sri Omar, Tan Sri Zakri, on certain areas, they will be called, right? But what about the inputs of the people on the ground that is now experiencing this, So that's why I think when they ask me all the time, inter-academy panel, how is it that you get 80% success rate? I will always answer, before we come up with the policy, we always do stakeholder engagement. That's academic science style. We do stakeholder engagement, we do survey, we find out as much as possible what's happening 3,000 feet on the ground, so that the policy that we now put forward is policy that is not academic, it's actually practical, it's doable, it's actionable. So those are I think some of the things that probably need to be done. And probably also the role of academy, as I see it, may also change from just change maker to probably a selective doer as well.
Thank you, Dato' Asma. Thank you. So that is the first segment. In segment 2, we will discuss about where we are and what are the challenges. As we heard just now in segment 1, Dato' Asma talking about STIE, whereby we bring together the both sector, the science and technology sector and also economic sector. These ideas start in academy in 2010 under Mega Science. First time we did Mega Science, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, 15 sector of economy. Before that, academy's paper all on physics, chemistry. Then we start to have this Mega Science looking at economic sector from the science and technology innovation perspective. So Tan Sri Yusof, under your, you introduced Mega Science. When we start doing this Mega Science, we never think it will take 3 phases to finish 15 sectors of economy. But that is the basis of most of academic studies during that time, for us to come up with foresight, come up with 10-10, and during that time, we didn't coin STIE per se, but we already addressing economic issue through the lens of science and technology. So from this, how did we ensure all academic studies and initiative keep pace with the country's STI ambitions from that time until today? What is your perspective on this?
Well, it is a struggle because in order to facilitate studies after studies to be done, in order to bring up the knowledge or base to become the platform for which we launch the use of science for the economic development of the country, we have to somehow get the studies done. Otherwise, we have nothing to recommend, nothing to tell the policymakers what they should adopt and so on. So this is the idea, to get the knowledge base upfront ready so that we know which area to push for science to really do its work in developing the country's economy. When we want to use technology and science for adoption to develop the economy, we can either import this technology and improve upon the technology and innovate on the technology, or we create the technology. These two potential ways of using technology, either by importing foreignly developed technology or using locally developed technology, both are relevant. Both need to be pursued or to be scrutinized to see which one can give us the advantage. So that's why we were busy looking at scoping all these technologies to see which one can be adopted more centrally. I give you an example. For example, China they have been persistently developing battery technology. I think it's developed there because I mentioned earlier that I was trying to have a long-lasting battery to energize my harvesting pole for the oil palm industry. But at that time, 15 years ago, the battery could not last very long and it was useless. Now I think the battery could last very long, could work on the harvesting pole. But more importantly, China has made the battery so powerful and long-lasting, it can work on EV vehicle. And what does this imply? Within a short span of time, by focusing, they are able to deliver to the world electric vehicle that would wipe out all the petrol vehicles, because in every way, the electric vehicle is superior to the petrol vehicle now because of the because of the battery technology has been developed and perfected. So even me, I use an electric vehicle, and then needing cheap electricity, I use a solar panel, which is also mostly developed in China. But on my roof now, you have solar panel, energy, giving me electricity for the whole house and the electric vehicle. So essentially, I'm using solar energy for everything. And the world has come to use solar energy or electric from the sun to use all kinds of tools run on batteries, grass cutter and everything. So this is a revolution by itself. It makes very light of very heavy work before. Now all using batteries, so to speak, even your handphone. Yeah. So to me, the challenge is to pick the right technology platform and develop it to sustain the development of the country. Whatever that is, I think it is a long journey, and we must try and figure out where we want to go from this period to the next period. What do we pick as our platform to push the economy forward? It could be coding, like what they do with ChatGPT, Yeah. It's all coding optimization, and you get ChatGPT coming out, being delivered and commercialized. Don't forget commercialization. Unless you get income from what you do, nobody in the private sector will want to take your technology. So I have a technology using blockchain technology to do traceability for the oil palm, where the oil palm is produced, which plantation and so on, blockchain tracing all the way to buyer in Europe. But because nobody wants to buy it, this technology, although very ideal, is not yet implemented because the money is not coming forward to the developer of the technology to sustain his business. So this is how technology has to be in touch with the commercial income that the technology will provide to make it applicable for the consumers to use. Thank you.
For technology, Datuk Tengku, technology change very fast. Sometimes we jump into technology, but the ecosystem is not ready. Yes. So what is your view on this?
Well, we faced that when we started our foresight work. I was involved with, of course, Tan Sri Mazlan was the director. I was the co-director of the project. And just because we just heard from Tan Sri Yusof, we actually used the Mega Sains. The Mega Sains was the foundation for the foresight. And because we had a very good understanding of what's coming in the future in various areas of technology, we could actually synthesize that information to figure out where Malaysia could be heading. But I want to cover not merely the technology part, but actually the people part. I mentioned in an earlier intervention that actually there is a model for political will. And that model involves knowledge. Because when we impart our knowledge to somebody else, the person listening to us, that's not knowledge, that is information. When does information become knowledge? When the person hearing the information internalizes into him or her mental model, then it is part of the structure of the way of thinking of the person. So in my experience of dealing with policy making or say, policy advancement, we have to actually impart the right information in a structured way. That's what we spoke earlier about policy making and so on. How we do it is actually we communicate, we engage with decision makers in a way that they can understand. That's why using simpler language is very important. And our experience so far is that researchers are not very good at it because they tend to use the language that they use among themselves, which is other researchers. In order to make policy work, we have to actually tone down the scientific language, tone up the policy language. In that manner, the listener who's about to make a very important decision can understand what we are trying to say.
We are narrating the...
We are narrating, yes. Something in a simple storyline that makes sense. So the person will internalize that information and put it into his or her frame of thinking. Then it is easy to recommend. And I believe that we have done that subconsciously because to get 80% buy-in for our policy work is actually an indication that we are succeeding. But of course, this is a small group of people who have been active in policy work. The 80-90% of our fellows have not been involved. And they still struggle with this. So that's why we hope that more will come in to benefit from this experience. Now, let me just take up the idea of political will. Political will does not come from the beginning. Will means not just one person. It's actually all the, I would say, top echelon of decision making must come together on a certain idea. So we have to engage with this team of people who are about to make a very important decision, I would say high stakes decision, with high risk. We have to reduce the risk and of course amplify the benefits. So this is where we actually engage with them in such a way that they begin to understand on their own terms, not our terms, on their own terms, what this decision really means. And then you build up that political will. So in other words, progressively you actually engage with them with good information which can easily be internalized into personal knowledge. That's how it works. I want to come back earlier when you mentioned the gap in the new economic opportunities that we worked on. Again, later, using the same framework, using the same mega sciences that we've been talking about, I argued at that time that all this can be used beneficially for the country. However, there was one major gap. The gap was the researchers were not talking to the industry. And we call that the innovation chasm. Because innovation is, true meaning is the creation of value from knowledge, from research output. And the fact is, researchers on their own cannot produce that value. Because that value creation process is not in their sector. It is in the economic sector. So industries must take on that job. So you have to pass the baton from the research side to the industry side. And the chasm can only be closed if the two come together. So the word trust came up in the discussion. There is insufficient trust between the two sides. So all this work so far to build the innovation systems of Malaysia have been to do about creating greater trust between the two. And that work is continuing.
Dr. Asma, after hearing that, it's a process to build up trust, just like what Datuk Tengku said. Sometimes the study is 500 pages, but when we present to the National Science Council, it's only 8 slides. And that 8 slides is the narration that touch the heart of the policymakers and they internalize to understand, just like what Datuk Tengku said. So through your experience, which part is the most difficult? The narration to the policymakers within 10-15 minutes given to us for them to understand the gist of our recommendations and to bring all the wisdom of all our fellows. We have 505 fellows. Everybody have their own ideas. How do we purify the ideas for it to make sense to policymakers and for them to internalize it and take it? Do you think this process is it is a very complex process because you're bringing in all stakeholders, as you said, and we are trying to push the things for them to understand the situation without fear?
Yeah, thank you. that's also a very difficult question. It's a complex one, and how do you now, when you're doing the studies, you have to have evidence, and I think along the 30 years, Akademi has already built the credibility, our credibility, such that when we call people, NGO, interfaith, ministries, industries, they all come. They come. And that's how we can get, stakeholder engagement more than 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 8,000. We can get that. And I think that is credibility that we built throughout the years. Because why? Because of trust. They trust that if they do come and say their piece, we will listen and that we will take it up and make it into something palatable, that at the end of the day, there will be change. That is the expectation people have of the Academy of Science, right? So that to me is a big burden also, because when people trust you, people have high expectation and you have to deliver. Right. And to deliver, this is why I say that gap now, to go from the studies to now making it into a policy so that it can be institutionalized in the country, that people can see change. Right. So, and we have done many studies. And I say that to come down to the level, sometimes we have to combine studies. You have megatrend, you have foresight study, then we have ESET, emerging science, technology, and engineering studies. And then we combine that. And that's how we create 10-10 My STIE. Because if you have megatrend that link to economy, but how do you do it? And so now with ESET, 95 technologies, how do you remember 95 technologies? So at the end of the day, when we put it down, it becomes 10 technologies that will bring Malaysia industry to 2030 and beyond, and also 10 areas of economic impact that will make a change or dent in the economy of the country. So when we start to show that, then I think it gets to be picked up by EPU, get picked up by the ministries to now say, okay, let's have that now part and parcel of the RMK. And you notice that when we were starting to build credibility and trust, we find that we now have 14 ministries that commission us. And we find that we are no longer stuck in science alone. We are now doing education reform for the country. We have been given the opportunity to do New Horizon for science and technology in changing the higher education platform for the country. We're doing blue economy, we are doing next generation talent for the industry. I mean, we are now, I think we have gone beyond just science and technology alone. People now see us as a think tank that can now make a change and difference. And why do people see that? Because of the way we are communicating. I do understand how difficult it is to be given only 8 slides, a study that will take 2 years, a study that will be presented in STIPAC with 100 over slides, and suddenly all that have to be synthesized to 8 slides to make a difference whether they take it or leave it. That, to me, is what you need to teach most of the fellows, and what we need to teach the younger generation, how to do that. Even how to do the how of presenting ideas to policymakers does make a difference to whether we make it or break it in maybe making that change. And I think now that we have built 10-10 My STIE, this should be a platform, a blueprint that we can now say, hello, science and technology can make a difference to the economy, change the life of the people, change the way we educate people, and all that. That should be the blueprint. But to do that, Can we now say, okay, I take what Tan Sri Basiron say, you don't give me the money, I can't show it to you. To me, as I said in the beginning, our problem is that we have great ideas, but implementation on the ground is usually the problem, that we don't see the impact. Can we now put forth to say, if you agree with this 10-10 MICE TIE, you need to provide us with the funding that will allow 10-10 MICE TIE to be shown, either as a pilot or as a test bed or a sandbox, whatever. Can we now have the fund to show not only from one farm, let's say we want to do on agriculture, not only from one farm in one state, but several farms in one state, and then move up to the state level, to the district level, and show that, in that state, you don't simply do anything. You say, okay, based on the ecosystem of the state, this is the kind halal, for example, will take off in this state. But halal will not take off in another state. Agriculture, for example, will take off in this state, but not in another state. So we have done all that study, but to me, yes, 10-10 MICE is part and parcel of the RNK, but if you just take 10-10 MICE, but you don't understand the concept of 10-10 MICE, you don't internalize it, you don't have the knowledge. And as far as that is concerned, you cannot even see the impact of IoT, the impact of the science in turning around to create food security or whatever. So knowledge is still not yet institutionalized and internalized by the people who want to carry it out. So to me, there's a lot more challenges. That's why I said at the end of the day, maybe we have to turn around to become a selective doer as well, so that we can show on this test bed. And I don't mean like one pilot. I mean like test it in different states, because different states have different ecosystem. And this has to be shown that 10-10 can work in any ecosystem, as long as you understand the ecosystem and how the interaction of the ecosystem will now take off and make 10-10 actually deliver for the people, which is why we designed 10-10 for. But it will show how science and technology is integrated in the policy, as integrated into the economy, and hopefully turn the life, livelihood of the people in that state.
But in order to do that, sometimes people want to hear good things only in the report. But for Akademi, we just, by evidence, that's what the analysis is. And how do we position and maintain our independency in the future for them to understand by doing more quality kind of studies? Because now, like Dato' Asma said, we already got some trust from 14 ministries. Now we already start working with state governments and so on and so forth. But we always said, we are telling the truth. But the way we are telling the truth, we don't picket, or we don't go to the media and, write negative things or things like that. But the way we are telling the truth is showing them but giving solutions.
To me, trust is something that is not a fixed position. It is actually trust building. It is a process. But in order to get there, we need to go through a number of steps. I think others have mentioned before. Let me just say the first step is always legitimacy. According to the legal framework, of course, we have legitimacy. It is our job, the mandate actually, to take science and technology to a position where it can influence policies and influence development programs. That's our job. But legitimacy is not enough. We need to gain credibility. So when we do our work, people who see us as providing something useful and productive, then we achieve credibility. But again, credibility is not enough. In order for them to actually not just agree with what we say, to actually do it, requires a high level of trust. And as we have been reminded repeatedly, it is not mere thinking. We must go from a think tank to a think and do tank. And of course, in our framing of the challenge for the Akademi, we have said that we are a think tank as well as a change maker. To me, the change maker part is the do part. In order to make change, we have to engage with people. And this is where one of the major challenges for the country is actually the way we work. We work in silos. So as I said from the beginning, I always believe if the scientists want to do something impactful, all the scientists must come together. So we must integrate, no silos. But on the outside world, we can see silos everywhere. You have silos in the public sector, you have silos in the private sector, you have silos in the community, everywhere. So how do you actually bring people together? Fortunately for us, there is a binding force through science and technology. And that binding force can be strengthened if you also include the human sciences. We have discovered lately, because much of the work we do, although it is based on good science and good technology, even good innovation, we cannot make change until there is another level of human touch. So that's why I've been promoting, for example, just to bring in the ideas that may be beneficial for the future. Most people think of technology as the solution. So they go for technology-driven solutions. But technology-driven solutions sometimes forget the human element. That was realized many years ago by people who develop IT products. Because IT products tend to touch people very fast. Mobile phone, example. So how did they solve that problem? They look at it from the user interface point of view. The UI must be human-centric. So it is natural, it is instinctive, it can be learned very fast. You can see children, babies learning how to use the mobile phone because it is very intuitive. That's human-centric. But now we have another problem. We have a problem of environment, for example, climate change, depleting resources, pollution. Those problems cannot be solved merely by looking at technology solutions and human-centered solutions. We must think of humanity as a whole. Simply because if you want to solve this major problem that touches every human citizen of the world, it is obvious that every person must become an actor. So agency at the level of every individual becomes necessary. So we have gone from technology-centric to humanity-centric, now, human-centric, finally to the humanity-centric. So all these words have actually achieved some level of understanding within the academy and its fellows. But in the outside world, still a problem. So we have to actually try to cross the silos by using this sort of ideas to tell stories. Of course, the stories, again, to repeat, information. How do we get our listeners, our audiences, to actually internalize and make it their own in their own way? Meaning that they reframe all these ideas according to how they see the world in the future, not the present. The future world must be quite different from what we have now.
I think I want to add to that. Yes. To me, education is key. Okay. So to have this change from human-centric to humanity-centric, why? Always that why. So then you have to be able to explain that. And I think that's where fellows, we come from different discipline, different background. And I think having 14 ministries is a good thing because now the idea is now able to spread. Like the idea of humanity-centric is now part and parcel of the higher education blueprint. It's going to be part and parcel that we put forward for education reform for the country, such that now, because we believe that education is the key, is a turning point, that if you want to make any change, mindset change, you got to begin with education first. You want to make politicians being more aware about the environment, about the policies that we want to bring in under planetary health and sustainability, education is key. So that's why we say now that we are happy that Akademi now is also contributing the ideas and the concept into higher education blueprint. Our ABDAIS is into that. Humanity-centric is into that. Planetary health is also part and parcel of the higher education blueprint. Changing the R&D ecosystem in the country is also part and parcel of the higher education. So there's a lot that we can do, and then also now having part and parcel of the education reform for the country, because all these changes cannot just begin at the university level. It has to also start from young, from preschool to primary to secondary. So this is where I think with the fellows from different disciplines, depending on where they get involved in blue economy, in palm oil, in whatever that we want to do, climate change, and all that, so can now put in place all these ideas, and then so that we can now move forward. And I think, the concept of working with the industry, that is now a policy, an important policy that needs to be made, because without that policy, university and industry don't work together. But the other one that I think that is the biggest challenge is a mindset change to stop silo from happening. That protecting your turf is something that I think we need to break this. But somewhere along the line, we have asked many times, we cannot get information. We are supposed to be the database. We are supposed to do scoping, horizon. Then we study policies in the country before we can come up with our own policy. But to do that, we need information. We need data. And data is something that is so close that the ministries do not share. And when ministries do not share, how now do we go forward? We don't have, so we can only work, we can't get primary data, we have to get like secondary data. That to me is something that you need to break. That this silo mindset, if we can break that, I think that we stand a chance of doing a whole nation approach, because most of the problems that we talk about is not by one ministry, it's an interaction. As much as you say Academy of Science is integration of all discipline, in order to have this policy properly being able to help the people of the country, it cannot work in silo. It has to be a whole nation approach. And I hope that will be the next battle of how we can move forward. How do we turn around the country to make it a whole nation approach?
So we're coming to the third segment. This is a segment where we say what's next for Akademi. How do we envision Akademi for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? So I would like to ask our founding president, Tan Sri Omar, where do you see Akademi? Are we on the right track, telling the truth, coming out with the reports? This is where we are now. Where do you see Akademi in the 30 years coming forward, Tan Sri?
Thank you. Well, when we started, the first council translated the Academy's mandate into 4 tasks. One was to provide advice to the government on matters related to STI of national importance. Number 2, to foster a culture of excellence in STI in Malaysia. This is particularly for the scientific community. Number 3, to assist in upgrading technological capacity and capability of Malaysian industrial sectors. And number 4, to promote public awareness and understanding of the importance of STI in everyday life. In other words, to promote a citizen that is at ease with science and technology. And then later council added 2 other points. One was international networking and collaboration, and then scientific publication. Okay. The first part, during our time, we spent a lot of time on number 1, advising the government. And we managed to put in place quite a few things, including the establishment of memos. And then the MPDC, MIT, and 7 other things. But there were other things that when we advised government, it seemed to touch on other organizations' turf. And that's sometimes there is a bit of misunderstanding there. So this goes back to the idea that while we want to be a change maker, and why we want to continue to be a change maker. Sometimes we cannot do that fully, as you know, because change is in the hand of other people sometimes. So that we need to look at. So what we have actually in Malaysia, we have a pretty good system of advice. But I cannot say that we have a good system of receiving and acting on good advice. So what we have been promoting all along is that what we need is perhaps an action council on science, technology and innovation. At one time, we have an action council on all economic issues, right? During economic crisis. This is a technological crisis actually at the moment, because technology is developing so rapidly, and all we can do is being technology aware and technology ready. But one mustn't forget that any new technology that comes into being can be used for the good and can also be used for the negative. So all this requires capacity to monitor, capacity to analyze, capacity to give advice to an organization that can receive and act on good advice. So this is why we go back to the idea of an action council rather than just whatever that we have now.
On that note, Tan Sri, on Action Council,
Yeah.
last year, end of, I think in November, we present a paper on how we want to strengthen National Science Council to become more actionable
Yeah.
and more cross-cutting, supaya it's not so tough. Maybe Dato' Tengku can share a little bit on that, memperkasa National Science Council.
Yeah, thank you, Tan Sri, for reminding us what our mandate really looks like. Actually, we are here to make change. But let me start with the principle. The biggest change of all is what Professor Asmah just mentioned a few minutes ago, that we need to educate everybody on what science is all about. If we don't have a scientific society, then we may make decisions that are not scientific, meaning that we make random decisions, sometimes knee-jerk decisions that are not based on good information or good analysis. So we can make a lot of mistakes, especially now when, as Tan Sri says, things are changing very, very rapidly. We saw that. We saw that the complexity of the decision-making process in the scientific system and not leading towards the growth of a stable, structured delivery system to develop our knowledge base, scientific knowledge into innovation. So the innovation ecosystem, as we kept saying, actually was dysfunctional and remains today. So that message was carried through to the National Science Council just last year. We propose, not just telling the problem, we propose a solution. And our solution is to empower the National Science Council itself to become more action-oriented, the way that Tan Sri mentioned earlier. How we do this is actually to restructure the whole National Science Council to the effect that, to make it very simple, it becomes more mission-oriented. So big ticket items, big projects in Malaysia should be funded, and of course funding will be guaranteed for a number of years so that we can deliver on moonshots for the country. So these moonshots are not going to be decided by, least of all, ASM. ASM can propose, but the country should decide. ASM becomes advisor to at least figure out from the scientific point of view the viability and of course the practicality of these proposals. What happens is that there is going to be a coordinating committee that will be chaired by the Chief Secretary of the government, so that when the projects come in, there will be less silo. Every ministry, every agency that's involved in research will come together and figure out which parts of the mission they will actually perform. But the performance of each project related to the mission will be done, I would say, autonomously, but not independently. It will be related to the fulfillment of the mission. If you want to land a person on the moon, every project must make sure that that part fulfills its function to land a man on the moon. In other words, it cannot be some sort of random decision by individuals, or I would say warlords. There will be no such situations, of course, ideally. So we are going to test this out soon. We are gathering a number of projects we think are worthwhile to consider as missions. We just had a discussion just a few days ago at the council level. Certainly, we have a list. But to get a few off the ground first, to launch a few rockets into space, that will be the start. Hopefully, all will land somewhere as designated.
Yeah.
But some may fail, but at least the learning process is what we are going to learn from, that will tell us what the future may look like. And of course, we cannot underestimate what the future looks like. It is much more technological than it is today. How much more, I don't want to speculate, but I feel that it's going to be quite different from today's world. So that's how it is.
To summarize, what is the role of Akademi going forward? It cannot be different from a simple concept that we must continue to be the advisor and the implementer within our capacity for a total, what I call the total national capacity in STI. And what is that? First of all, a government committed to providing a comprehensive STI physical and soft infrastructures. That's number one. Number two, a scientific and technological community, ethical and competent, and able to contribute to and to draw from the global pool of scientific knowledge and technological know-how. Number three, a private sector capable of creating wealth through the application of technology and innovation in both traditional and new sectors. Sometimes we forget that the traditional sector requires technology as well. Yeah? And then a society that is at ease with science, literate and imbued with a culture of creativity, innovativeness, and entrepreneurship. And finally, an efficient governance system enabling effective policy making, planning, implementation, and public debate on international collaboration that ensures long-term commitment to STI development. That is my interpretation of total national capacity. And it is our responsibility as an academy to continue to do that, to promote, to foster, to advise as well as to do wherever within our capacity to do.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that is a good summing up. And Akademi in 2022 have been given another, tadi Tan Sri cakap the 6 role of Akademi. On top of that 6 role, they give us another role. Datuk Asmah sempat rasa 6 bulan. Cabinet decide to appoint whoever the president of the Akademi to play the role as a science advisor to the Prime Minister and to the nation. So Datuk Asmah, maybe that is something that, I mean, we have to take note of. That is the role of Akademi. And Akademi in 2022 have been given another role. Cabinet decide to appoint whoever the president of the Akademi to play the role as a science advisor to the Prime Minister and to the nation. So Datuk Asmah, maybe that is people see Akademi playing our role, then they see, oh, more just for Akademi to play this additional role. So, in the future, do you think this is something that can enable Akademi to give more impactful kind of contributions or ideas or building up the landscape for the country?
I think what that recognition is based on trust. Trust that Akademi will deliver all that Datuk Tengku and Tan Sri Omar has mentioned. So somewhere along the line, I feel that we should be a leader in national foresight and policy innovation for the country, that we become the science, technology, innovation, economy, knowledge hub, right? Knowledge hub, not information factory, but knowledge hub. Maknanya, we will be able to see what kind of complex, we should be the one that navigate the country to go through all this complex journey of the future. The future is full of unknown, right? And a lot of new challenges with the advent of the disruptive technology coming up with AI and quantum computing. Everything will now start to change. So how now do we navigate the country? I think that's the base, the trust that they now have on us to now be able to deliver. So that's why I think we should be the leader in foresight, because who else does a good national foresight? Because we are not ministry based. We do the foresight for the country, right? So that's one. And of course, the policies that need to be there so that we become the knowledge hub. But I want to add one more. We should also be the place, not only in terms of knowledge, we should also include indigenous knowledge. That the knowledge is not just about science. We should now have a whole system. We should recognize there are other knowledge systems as well. And that's what I mean by having a knowledge bank. So that all of this is now, because everybody have their own way, indigenous knowledge have their own way, and the way of life of people now, as we go to humanity-centric, there must be respect for other knowledge, spiritual knowledge, religious knowledge, indigenous knowledge, local knowledge. All that respect must be there. So how do we put all that together? So this is another trust. And the other one, I think, is to be what I call the cradle to train or nurture the future generation of science, technology, innovation, who is now more humanity-centric. Not just technology-centric, but more humanity-centric, who now thinks about the whole ecosystem, systems thinking. This is the new culture we want to build in them, not just linear thinking, but system thinking in all of that. And when you start to think about the ecosystem and whatnot, then move on collaboration. And collaboration is not about local, it's also about international, it's also about regional. And I think that is also another way forward. We didn't emphasize very much on internationalization, but I think science diplomacy needs to be there. But more important with science diplomacy, I totally believe in building inside before we deploy outside. Then we have stories to tell. You know, we can say, oh, we made 1010. Also, what have you done with 1010? Show me some examples of 1010. Did it turn around some state or whatever in your country? We need to have a show and tell. So that's why I think that now that we have 1010, I think the next 10 years probably is to be able to create that test bed so that we can show and tell. And that, you know, because 1010 MySTIE has received a lot of publications, a lot of knowledge. I mean, around the world, people know about 1010. But I think at the end of the day, it's very important that people locally see 1010 as another savior where science, technology, innovation, mission-oriented, make that change for that state, for the country. Until and unless the people feel it, science is not yet there to be science for all, to have people who are at ease with science in the country. So I think we need to make people feel that science is very important and it's part of life. It's not something that you got to learn. All of us are using science without realizing it. Yeah.
Thank you. Tan Sri Yusof, from you, I learned the importance of money. No money, we cannot move. Okay. Then with Datuk Tengku, he said, got 4 M's, have to focus. Money, mandate, manpower, and mechanism. How we want to move. How do you see Akademi moving forward? We want to stay true independent, but our budget 100% coming from government. So these are things that we need to balance. working in academy, I see sometimes we have to remind the ministry on our independence, even though the budget come from Rini, but sometimes we have to reiterate back for them to understand our role as an independent advisory body to the country. So where do you see academy in the future for these 4 M's?
I think the issue is we have to see the journey of taking science to the end destination. And what do we need? We need enabling mechanism. So at every level of this journey, you need academic science to advise about the appropriate enabling mechanism at each stage. If it is research, yes, you have to advise on what kind of research, how it's to be done and so on. If it is transfer of technology, how and so on, the how part has to be advised by academy, develop the enabling mechanism. I give you an example. I was trying to develop the biodiesel industry, all right? So what was the enabling mechanism? We did the research, pilot trial, everything done. Nobody wants to take it up. The enabling mechanism is we floated grant, to 3 companies, and they used the grant to develop the prototype biodiesel plant. And after that, it was all history because they were flooded with demand for establishing biodiesel plant after seeing that the government biodiesel plant is working, and making money potentially. So this is one example. Then I floated the idea of building automated palm oil mill, and what was the enabling mechanism that we did? We did the research, yes, that was the enabling mechanism, but we did also the collaboration with industry and continue to get government funding, 20 million, to get this collaborator from industry to run the pilot trial. And now it is like $500 million revenue a year building palm oil mills all over the world. This is an example of enabling process of taking science at the research stage to pilot plant to everything. I did another one through SAMDABI, for example. We want to show that we can make nylon from palm kernel oil, palm oil, carboxylic acid, and so on. Everything was done in the US, the research. We got a research center there. And then we decided to build a plant in Johor. And what was the enabling procedure? I use an example of Canada. We have to put grant also, incentivize grant to get the plant to be established. They established a plant. And then at the end of the process, they were about to go into production. Then the petroleum price crashed, and then nylon becomes so cheap. Producing nylon from palm oil cannot compete. So they closed the plant. And of course, that is a failure, but it is a process. I give you an example of how this enabling process is taking shape in other sectors, like internationally, this AI, ChatGPT, and the race that will change the world. This AI was probably very familiarly researched during the early 2000s and so on, reading at this book here. But over time, a lot of them failed, and some was able to latch on to the big guns of the industry to get some funding and so on. These are the enabling mechanism supported by the big computer companies, So in the end, eventually, they only recently, 2022, I see here in this book, saying that they are able to launch ChatGPT and make some commercial income out of this. And now they're talking about the race that will change the world. Of course, China is running into this race, competing. Well, what happened here? The enabling mechanism was, the research was done long time ago. But in the process, there is money needed to scale up to a commercial use of this technology and research result. And now it is commercialized and making money. And huge, value of ChatGPT is billion, right, in the stock market. That is how science will help the economy to grow, but at every point along the way, you have to think about the enabling mechanism. And I think Akademi has to do the analysis of how to advise the government and so on to establish this enabling mechanism at every stage of the process. Otherwise, it gets stuck. You know, it doesn't move forward. Whatever policy is also an enabling mechanism.
Yes.
I said biodiesel. I developed a policy for the government to adopt, you know, and they meet until the policy was perfected to allow commercialization to proceed. In other words, ada subsidy lah, you know. So that's how it works. So to me, yes, we don't have a direct involvement, but we can indirectly influence the whole process by advising on the enabling mechanism that will make the whole thing successful moving forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Because when we see this now slowly, Tan Sri, we are, even though before this Akademi tak ada direct involvement, now we are pulled to be in the direct involvement of it. And looking at it, we need wisdoms of the fellows and all our expert network to give more ideas, to involve more. And we hope with all the wisdoms, it start with the data, information, and then we have a lot of knowledge. Ada 1,000 over people that have knowledge. But to give that kind of knowledge towards some wisdom for the country to move forward, that is the challenge. Sometimes we see some ministries, they are skeptical. We are doing education reform. YB Rafizi, Datuk Sri Rafizi said, sometimes we have good ideas, nak scale up, we always fail. We cannot scale it up. I asked Datuk Asmah to find the data on how much money government spend to do all pilots. We have a lot of pilots, tapi bila nak scale up, it's stuck. That is one challenge that the country is facing right now. That Datuk Tengku Azman asked in the council, study how China's ecosystem is, how they scale up. So we need to know how they do it within the systems and within the stakeholder, how they connect each other. So it has been a good podcast for us today, and I hope this give our listeners to hear. And I hope we can wrap up. I will give each of the panelists 2 minutes to wrap up, and then see how we can play our role more impactful towards the betterment of our country. So, any panelists would like to start first? Datuk Tengku?
Let me continue from what we just heard from our other panelists. Trying to advise the government is not easy.
Yes.
So I've had the small benefit of trying to read for 2 years. My first 2 years of learning seems to indicate this very simply. We must be strategically aligned. So if you're not aligned, the messages will not get through. So fortunately for us, early on, the Akademi adopted the idea, the notion of post-normal times.
Yeah.
It's very important. Because the government, for reasons of its own, I feel they've done the right thing to actually bring the idea of post-normal times to the people. Because Malaysia tends to have a population of citizens who are very comfortable with the present. And any change that we want to bring brings discomfort the other way. But we can see that the future will be quite different from the present for many reasons. Among them is, of course, geopolitical, but there could be social, there could be economic, there could be also cultural and civilizational. These are all ideas that will influence our own future. When we speak about post-normal times, it is actually that idea of uncertainty, of complexity, of chaos, and contradictions. And we are facing this very moment because of the recent moves by the United States to change the global economic structure. So this is now real. The first dramatic exposure of what post-normal times actually mean. But this idea of post-normal times has been here for 30 years. Certainly, I've been reading about it for many, many years. And with the advent of the internet, I already anticipated that it will be like this. So when we speak about post-normal times, then science and technology comes to the fore, because many of the problems came through science and technology, and many of the solutions must also come from science and technology. So scientists now become, I would say, a very big actor in this system. But as we keep saying, why should the country or the people trust science and trust scientists? In the West, by the way, there is a current feeling that scientists cannot be trusted. That became very apparent during the COVID crisis. Even science, the science system is being questioned. In Malaysia, currently, when our surveys show that scientists are still trusted, but that may not last. The question is, how do the scientists maintain that position of trust? Not only with the government, but with the people in general. It's not an easy problem. So the Academy of Sciences now has a challenge to confront that issue, to circumvent any possibility that science and scientists will be less and less trusted. So I believe that everything must start from the home. In other words, we must create a mindset among the scientists, which I highlighted from the beginning, that science is not independent. It is not an elite knowledge. It is one of many kinds of knowledges in the plural. So, recognition of human sciences, recognition of indigenous knowledge, recognition of other legitimate systems of knowledge, of which modern science is only one. So when we do not have the elitist approach, then we are on better terms to actually promote our ideas, integrated, collaborative, in partnership with others, that actually show the future to our policymakers and our citizens what we all should do together. Not us proposing something from the scientific point of view, but something that actually touches the hearts of all people in the country. So that is the challenge, I think. And I don't think we are here to promote something only scientists believe. We should promote something that everybody believes. And the place to start is from the home. Our own scientists must see themselves as part of society. And I think that's the toughest job I think that we have before us in the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Datuk Tengku. Datuk Asma, any last word?
I think whatever that has been said by Datuk Tengku that I wanted to say. I think science is for all, right? But as much as science is for all, arts and humanities is also for all.
Yes.
And I think that's where there is a blend of in science that is arts and arts that is science. And I think if we continue on that phase, we can start from the family all the way to the nation, to the state, to the country. That's probably what we need to go forward with, and to be able to say that we are not the only one that with the knowledge.
Yes.
No room for arrogance. I think there is a time that we all need to understand humiliation, that there are other knowledge systems as well that needs to be integrated as we now move forward. So I look forward to a brighter situation with positive developments once kita undergo our own mindset change as the science in the country. That's why I say we need to lead for the foresight, but we need also to be the knowledge STI bank, knowledge bank for how to move and turn around STI and also and moving forward to actually combine that with the arts and the humanities to now provide mission-oriented solutions that will create the kind of impact that the country wants to see.
Encik Omar, any last words?
Science affects everybody, but other area of knowledge, not necessarily so. So does that mean scientists have got bigger responsibilities? But I do not think that we are training our scientists to think that way. So this goes back to education, lah, the concept of education. And I'm not sure how you do that, but that needs to be thought through and elaborated, because a community that is not at ease with science does not go well for the for the nation.
Last, Kasih Yusof.
I think the word competitive comes to mind, because whatever we develop into the future, we must always be competitive. Otherwise, no point in developing it. It cannot compete. So the world is moving so fast, and I see the lead in moving so fast is by China. Everything, is now China-centric in terms of scientific development, whatever.
Everything.
Everything. And they are leading and running ahead. And we are a small country. We can't be competitive enough in science, in developing science, in commercializing. So we have to go to China and engage in whatever way, so that we can at least get a rub-off effect of what they do, the trend that they are seeing, and so on, and bring home and then adopt and adapt to be able to be competitive in the future in our SNT.
Yes.
And that includes a lot of the enabling mechanism that I just said earlier in taking it there to the end point. So don't forget, we are not a big country, a small country, and we are far behind in the scientific development in every field. Of course, palm oil, we are a bit okay lah. So in that sense, move around, look at what is happening elsewhere and study. You talk about study. Education is not just at school. It is also go to China.
Learning, yes.
No. What did the Quran say? Find ilmu up to China, kan?
Yes, yeah. And
So
true
now
enough.
is the right time. Now is the right time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Thank you to all panelists. I think it's a good discussion today. It's giving our audience what Akademi is, where we are now, and how we were heading in the future. And I hope through this discussion, we can face our post-normal era, that what Datuk Tengku said, and we are more strategic in pushing our agenda to ensure that whatever that we invest, be it mandate, money, manpower, and also mechanism, it really impact the country and the people. So with that, I hope this will be a good beginning of another good 30 years of Akademi, in order for us to play our role based on our mandate. In our Akta, we have 14 functions, and it already been combined to 6 functions right now, and move forward, and we hope to see more good ideas going into the development of our nation. With that, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.